2 years ago, I was completely lost in life, drifting through a series of dead-end jobs with no meaningful relationships and no real sense of direction. I felt a profound emptiness, a void that I tried to fill with various temporary fixes, but nothing seemed to stick until I stumbled upon something strange and exhilarating. It started one afternoon when I was out for a walk in my neighborhood and noticed a construction crew leaving a house for their lunch break. I knew the owners were at work, and on a sudden, inexplicable whim, I walked up to the front door and found it was unlocked. I stepped inside and took a self-guided tour of their home, and the rush of being in someone else's private space without their knowledge was absolutely intoxicating. I stayed for several minutes, soaking in the thrill of the trespass, and slipped out just before the workers returned. After that day, I was hooked. I began breaking into homes I knew were empty just for the sheer adrenaline rush of standing in a room and knowing the inhabitants had no idea I was there. I never stole a single item. I just wanted to observe their lives from the inside. However, like every other high I had chased, the simple act of being inside eventually lost its spark, and the eerie rush began to fade. I needed to push the boundaries further to regain that feeling, so I started calling myself a reverse thief. Instead of taking things, I began leaving small, inconspicuous items behind, things that shouldn't be there, but weren't obvious enough to be noticed immediately. I would fantasize about the homeowners' reactions when they eventually found my gifts, and the thought of the confusion I was causing made me feel like a giddy child on Christmas morning. In one house, I even left a folded blanket on the living room couch, a blanket I had brought with me specifically for that purpose. In hindsight, I realize how twisted and invasive this behavior was. If anyone had done the same to me, I would have been terrified and called the police. But at the time, it became my entire life, and I based my whole week around planning these intrusions. I became a master at people watching, learning their schedules and finding the weak points in their security, whether it was a spare key hidden under a doormat or a fake rock. My actions grew darker as my need for a reaction intensified. I wanted to cause real friction, real doubt. One afternoon, I broke into a house and left a large pink hair tie and an eyeshadow pencil in the bathroom, then hid in a bush outside to watch the couple return from work. I listened as the woman found the items and immediately accused her husband of having another woman in the house. Their fighting was exactly the kind of chaotic energy I was craving, and I felt like a powerful, mischievous monster. I loved the control I had over their lives, but it was only a matter of time before the universe decided it was my turn to feel that same fear. The shift happened on an ordinary afternoon when I arrived home from work and noticed something sitting on my kitchen counter that definitely hadn't been there when I left. It was a small, delicate vase containing a single yellow flower. My heart dropped into my stomach when I saw a note next to it, written in elegant cursive, that simply said, "We know it was you." I felt physically sick as I realized that someone had breached the sanctuary of my own home. I frantically checked all my doors and windows, but everything appeared to be perfectly locked. I locked myself in my bedroom that night, my mind racing through every person I had ever targeted, but I had always been so careful to leave no trail. I couldn't call the police. If I reported a break-in, and this person actually knew about my reverse thievery, they could expose me and ruin my life. I spent the night in a state of pure paranoia, realizing that the game I had been playing with others was now being played on me. I woke up the next morning praying that the flower was a one-time warning, but I wasn't that lucky. After running a few errands, I returned to find a second gift waiting for me on the counter, a dead bird accompanied by a new note that said, "We're coming for you." The sight of the dead bird and the threatening note on my own kitchen counter shattered my sense of security. I realized that someone was not only watching me, but was also capable of entering my home at will, leaving no trace of forced entry. I ran to my bedroom and began packing a bag with shaking hands, desperate to escape the house and find safety at my parents' home. As I was gathering my clothes, I froze. I heard a muffled shuffling sound. It wasn't coming from the hallway or the next room. It was coming from the floor vent in the corner of my bedroom. I crept toward it and pressed my ear against the metal grate, and my blood turned to ice. I could hear movement and muffled voices coming from the basement. There was no doubt in my mind that someone was down there, right beneath my feet. I stayed as silent as possible, terrified that even the sound of my breathing would give me away. I slowly stood up, grabbed my bag, and moved toward the door with painful caution. Each floorboard that creaked beneath my weight felt like a thunderclap in the silent house. I reached the front door, which was located directly next to the basement door, and my curiosity momentarily overrode my fear. I needed to know who was doing this to me. I pulled the basement door open just a crack and listened. I heard the distinct sound of quiet voices talking, but as soon as I took a single step onto the wooden stairs, a loud shushing sound echoed up from the darkness. I shouted down into the basement, demanding to know who was there, but the voices vanished instantly. Panic took over. I slammed the basement door, bolted out of the house, and dove into my car. I drove to my parents' house, lying to them about a plumbing issue at my apartment so I could stay for a few days. During that week, I contacted my landlord and successfully asked to terminate my lease early. I spent the next month staying with my parents, only returning to the house to pack my remaining belongings during the daylight hours. When I arrived for the first time after a week away, I found the front door wide open, though I was certain I had closed it. Inside, the kitchen counter was covered in more gifts. Another dead bird, more yellow flowers, and a small toy car that was an exact replica of my own. I went to the bedroom and listened to the vent, then checked the basement, but the house was completely silent and empty. It felt as though they had left those items as a final farewell. As I was finally leaving for the last time, revering out of the driveway, I glanced across the street. Standing on the opposite sidewalk was an older couple, likely in their 50s or 60s. I had never seen them before, but they were staring directly at me. The woman smiled and waved, and in her hand she held a single yellow flower, the exact same kind that had been left in my kitchen. The man next to her remained motionless, watching me with a cold intensity. I didn't wait for a second longer. I stepped on the gas and sped away, watching them in my rearview mirror until they were out of sight. To this day, I have no idea who that couple was or how I had attracted their attention. I never reported the incidents to the police because I was too afraid of my own crimes being discovered. That experience effectively ended my life as a reverse thief. I live with constant paranoia now, jumping at every strange noise and looking over my shoulder every time I enter a room. I was a predator who enjoyed messing with people's lives, but the universe found a way to show me exactly how it felt to be the prey. Crime doesn't pay, because eventually, the shadows you play in will start playing back.